I am Jordan, 29 years old, and for the last 5 years I have lived in the basement of a house my family thinks they rent from a generous corporation. They see a girl in a hoodie staring at screens all day and assume I am unemployed. They do not know that I am a senior cloud solutions architect for 3 Fortune 500 companies and the owner of the very roof over their heads. My sanctuary was the basement, a cool, dark space hummed by the sound of cooling fans and the soft blue glow of LED indicators. It was not just a room, it was a data center. In the corner stood my pride and joy, a $45,000 server blade rack, processing real-time data for 3 major hospitals in Atlanta. It was a masterpiece of cable management and engineering until the door slammed open. My sister-in-law Ashley stomped down the stairs holding her phone up on a selfie stick, a ring light clipped to the top. She was talking to her live stream audience in that high-pitched fake voice she uses for social media. Hey guys, welcome back to my wellness journey. Today we are clearing out negative spaces to make room for the baby. She did not even look where she was walking. Her designer boot caught the main Ethernet cable running to the primary switch. I shouted for her to watch out, but it was too late. She stumbled, and in a fit of performative rage, she kicked the server rack. The sound of heavy metal crashing against concrete echoed like a gunshot. The hum of the fans sputtered and died. The blue lights turned to an angry flashing amber. My heart stopped. That was not a gaming computer. That was critical infrastructure. I stood up, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from a sudden spike of adrenaline. Ashley looked at the fallen machine, and then at me with pure disgust. "This rat hole smells like radiation," she screamed at her phone camera, turning the lens toward me. "Deshawn, get down here. Your sister has clutter everywhere. I need this space for my prenatal yoga series. You promised me a studio." My brother Deshawn thundered down the stairs in his tight suit pants that were a size too small. He looked at the chaos. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask what the machine was. He saw the flashing amber lights and the warning beep from the uninterrupted power supply unit. "Turn that noise off," he barked. "I am trying to take a call with a client." I tried to explain that the server was performing a critical backup, and if we did not restore power immediately, we could lose integrity on the RAID array. I tried to tell him that the machine on the floor cost more than his BMW. But he did not listen. He reached down to the main power strip, the surge protector that kept everything stable, and he ripped the cord out of the wall. The room went silent. The darkness was absolute except for the light from Ashley's phone. "There," Deshawn said, dusting his hands off, like he had done something heroic. "Now get this junk out of here. Ashley needs the feng shui to be right for the baby. You have been squatting down here long enough, Jordan." I looked at the black screens. Years of configuration, complex encryption keys, all hard shut down in a second. I did not cry. I did not scream. A cold calm washed over me, the kind of calm that comes before a hurricane. I realized in that moment that they did not just break a machine. They broke the last thread of patience I had for them. They had just severed their own lifeline, and they were too stupid to know it. I followed them upstairs to the living room, the bright contrast of the afternoon sun hurting my eyes after hours in the dark. My parents, Calvin and Betty, were sitting on the beige sectional sofa drinking tea like royalty. The television was on, tuned to a reality show about rich housewives. The irony was suffocating. This was a family meeting I had not been invited to, but was the subject of. My father pointed to a black plastic trash bag sitting by the front door. It was lumpy and tied with a jagged knot. "Your mother and I have packed your essentials," he said without looking at me. "We think it is time for you to launch. You are almost 30, Jordan. It is embarrassing to tell the church folks that our daughter is still finding herself in our basement." Finding myself. I wanted to laugh. I found myself years ago when I built my first company. I found myself when I bought this house under an LLC so they would have a place to live after Dad went bankrupt. I found myself every month when I paid the mortgage, the electricity, the water, and the internet bills they thought were magically low. Mom chimed in, sipping her tea. "We need the basement for Ashley. She is carrying the first grandson of the family. We need to prioritize the future, not support a failure. You sit down there all day playing video games while Deshaun is out there grinding selling insurance. Deshaun leaned against the mantel, posing like he was on the cover of Forbes. He pulled a money clip out of his pocket. It was mostly singles wrapped around a few 20s to make the roll look big. He peeled off 2 crumpled $100 bills and threw them on the floor at my feet. "Take that," he said with a smirk. "That should cover a night at a motel and a bus ticket. Don't come back until you have a real job. Maybe you can flip burgers. I heard they are hiring." I looked at the money on the floor. Benjamin Franklin stared back at me from the carpet. 5 years ago, I would have picked it up. I would have apologized. I would have begged for more time. But the Jordan who lived in fear was gone. She died the moment the server crashed. I bent down. Deshaun laughed, thinking I was going for the cash. Even Ashley giggled. But my hand moved past the money. I reached for a small silver object lying on the side table next to my keys. It was a Titan security key, a military-grade encrypted USB drive. It contained the digital certificates for everything: the banking access, the network administration protocols, the deed transfer documents. I stood up, sliding the cool metal drive into the pocket of my hoodie. I looked at my father, who refused to make eye contact. I looked at my mother, who was shaking her head in disappointment. I looked at Deshaun and Ashley, who were gloating in their victory. I stepped over the $200. "Okay," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "I will go. You want me to leave, so I will leave. But remember this moment. You called me a freeloader. You called me bad luck. Just remember that when I walk out that door, the luck of this house walks out with me." "You are so dramatic," Ashley said, rolling her eyes. "Just go. And do not steal the towels." I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and the trash bag of clothes. I did not look back. I opened the front door and stepped out into the humid Atlanta afternoon. The sky was gray and heavy, threatening a storm. It felt appropriate. I dragged my luggage down the driveway, the plastic of the trash bag scraping against the asphalt. I could see the curtain twitch in the living room window. They were watching, making sure I actually left. I walked until I was out of sight around the corner near the community park. A black, sleek SUV was already waiting for me. I had summoned it the moment I walked up the basement stairs. The driver, a large man named Marcus, who had driven me to high-stakes meetings for years, stepped out and took the trash bag from my hand with respect. "Ms. Jordan," he said, opening the rear door. "To the Four Seasons." "To the Four Seasons." "Marcus," I replied, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of expensive cedar and vanilla. As the car pulled away, I took out my phone. My notifications were blowing up. Deshaun had already posted the photo. He must have taken it through the blinds. There I was, looking small and pathetic, dragging a trash bag. The caption read, "Finally the freeloader is gone. New chapter for the family. God is good." I saw the likes climbing. I saw the comments from aunts and uncles who used to pinch my cheeks, now calling me a disgrace. I saw the heart reaction from my own mother. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. They wanted a show. I would give them a production. We arrived at the hotel, and the doorman greeted me by name. I checked into the presidential suite, the one with the panoramic view of the city. I ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon and sat down at the glass desk overlooking the skyline. I opened my laptop. It was a rugged, custom-built machine that could run a small country. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi and activated my VPN. I navigated to the Unify dashboard, the smart home management portal I had installed in the house on Maple Street. It showed the status of every device: the smart locks, the smart thermostat, the smart fridge, the high-speed internet gateway. Status connected. They wanted to live in a modern house, but they treated the architect like garbage. Deshaun wanted to be the man of the house. Fine. Let him figure out how to be the IT administrator of the house, too. I took a sip of the champagne, letting the bubbles sting my throat. "You want energy clean, Ashley?" I whispered to the empty room. "You want a fresh start?" I moved my mouse cursor to the bottom of the settings page. There was a red button labeled Factory Reset. It was not just a reboot, it was a nuclear option. It would wipe the ISP configuration. It would delete the saved Wi-Fi passwords. It would reset the smart locks to a default state that required a physical master key, which I had in my pocket. It would disconnect the smart thermostat from the bridge. I looked at the time. It was 7 p.m. Deshaun would be starting his evening live stream soon. Mom would be trying to order groceries online. Ashley would be streaming her yoga music. I clicked the button. "Are you sure?" the screen asked. "This action cannot be undone." I smiled for the first time that day. Confirm. On the screen, the status lights for the house on Maple Street went from green to gray. Offline, offline, offline. The show was just beginning. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when the chaos began inside the house on Maple Street. From the comfort of my hotel suite, I watched the temperature readings on my laptop screen climb steadily. I had set the radiant floor heating system to maximum output exactly 3 hours ago. The sensors indicated the ambient temperature in the master bedroom had just hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Ashley was the first to wake up, and she did not do it gracefully. Her scream pierced the air loud enough that I imagined the neighbors could hear it through the walls. She leaped out of bed, but the moment her bare feet touched the expensive hardwood floor, she shrieked again and scrambled back onto the mattress. The floor was searing hot. It was not enough to burn skin instantly, but it was hot enough to feel like standing on a car hood in the middle of July. "What is happening?" she screamed, her voice cracking with panic. "Deshaun, wake up! The house is on fire!" Deshaun groaned and rolled over, tangled in the high thread count sheets. He was sweating profusely, his silk pajamas clinging to his back. The air in the room was thick and dry, like a sauna that had been left on for days. He sat up, wiping sweat from his forehead, and looked around in confusion. There was no smoke, there were no flames. There was just an oppressive, invisible heat that seemed to radiate from everywhere at once. Then the curtain started. I had programmed the motorized blinds on a randomization loop. With a mechanical whirring sound, the heavy blackout curtains in the bedroom shot up, letting in a blinding beam of morning sunlight. Deshaun flinched, covering his eyes. 2 seconds later, the curtains slammed back down, plunging the room into darkness. Then up again, then down. Up, down. It was rhythmic and relentless, like a poltergeist possessing the window treatments. "Make it stop!" Ashley yelled, pulling the duvet over her head. "It is like a horror movie in here. Fix it, Deshaun. You are the man of the house, so fix it." Deshaun scrambled out of bed, hopping from one foot to the other to avoid the scorching floor. He ran to the smart home control panel mounted on the wall near the door. This was the brain of the house, the central hub that controlled everything from the lights to the locks. He tapped the screen aggressively, his wet fingers leaving smudges on the glass. I could see his frustration through the interface log on my screen. He was mashing the climate control icon. Access denied. He tried the lighting control. Access denied. He tried to perform a soft reboot. Access denied. Contact administrator. The text remained frozen on the screen in stark red letters against a black background. Deshaun stared at it, his jaw tight. He did not understand. In his mind, I was just the girl who lived in the basement. I was the freeloader. He never once considered that the administrator account was not a default setting, but a person. He ran out into the hallway where the chaos was even worse. My parents, Calvin and Betty, were standing outside their guest room, looking like melted wax figures. My mother was fanning herself with a magazine, her face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. My father was shouting at the ceiling fan, which was spinning in reverse at maximum speed, creating a bizarre updraft that rattled the light fixtures. "The devil is in this house," my mother wailed. "I told you that girl brought bad spirits. Now that she is gone, the house is purging itself." Deshaun ignored her and ran downstairs to the breaker box. I watched the system status flicker for a moment as he killed the main power. The lights went out. The curtains stopped moving. The fan slowed to a halt. For a moment, there was silence. Deshawn panted, standing in the dark hallway. I fixed it. Just a glitch. But the radiant floor heating was a hydronic system fueled by a separate boiler with a battery backup for the circulation pumps. The floors stayed hot. The heat did not dissipate, and because he had cut the power, the air conditioning could not turn on to cool the house down. He had just turned the house from a sauna into an oven. Within an hour, they had called an electrician. I watched the service van pull into the driveway through the exterior security cameras, which were on a separate circuit they had not found yet. The electrician, a middle-aged man with a tool belt and a confused expression, walked into the house, wiping sweat from his brow immediately. He spent 45 minutes poking around the panels, checking the wiring, and looking at the server rack in the basement that Ashley had kicked the night before. He came back up to the living room, shaking his head. "Look, I have never seen a residential setup like this," he told them. "This is not standard wiring. This is enterprise-grade architecture. The control systems are locked down with encryption. I usually only see in banks or hospitals. Every time I try to bypass a circuit, the system reroutes and locks me out. It is designed to prevent tampering. Just cut the wires." Deshawn demanded, his shirt completely soaked through. "If I start cutting wires on a system this integrated, I could trigger the fire suppression system, or permanently fuse the smart locks," the electrician warned. "I cannot touch this. You need the person who installed it. You need the administrator password. Who set this up?" Deshawn looked at Ashley. Ashley looked at Calvin. Calvin looked at the floor. "It was Jordan," my mother whispered. "She was always messing with wires down there." "Call her," Deshawn barked. "Tell her to get back here and fix this mess. Tell her we will not sue her if she unlocks the system right now." Ashley grabbed her phone, her acrylic nails clicking frantically against the screen. She dialed my number. I watched my phone light up on the hotel desk beside me. Incoming call from Ashley. I took a sip of my coffee and let it ring. It went to voicemail. She called again. And again. "She blocked me," Ashley screamed, throwing her phone onto the sofa. "That little witch blocked me." "Call from Dad," phone Deshawn ordered. My father dialed. Blocked. My mother dialed. Blocked. Deshawn tried from his business line. Blocked. I had scrubbed them from my digital life with the efficiency of a surgeon removing a tumor. They were standing in the multi-million-dollar house that was rejecting them, realizing for the first time that their comfort had always been entirely dependent on my goodwill. "We cannot stay here like this," Ashley whined, tears of frustration mixing with the sweat on her face. "I have a brand partnership live stream in 20 minutes. I am supposed to be promoting that new organic skincare line. I cannot look like a drowned rat." "You have to do it," Deshawn said, pacing the room. "We need the money. That mining rig in the basement is dead, and the electric bill is going to be insane. Do the stream. Just fake it." I watched with a mix of amusement and pity as Ashley tried to salvage her image. She ran to the bathroom and applied layers of waterproof setting powder, trying to matte down her shiny skin. She changed into a workout set, claiming it was athleisure chic. She set up her ring light in the corner of the living room, the only spot where the natural light was somewhat flattering since the smart bulbs were dead. She hit the go live button and plastered a fake bright smile on her face. "Hey lovelies, welcome back to my channel," she chirped, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I look a little dewy today, but that is because I am trying this amazing new detox method. I turned my home heating up to create a hot yoga sanctuary. It is all about sweating out the toxins and negative energy." Behind her, the curtains suddenly jerked upward again, triggered by the backup battery re-engaging. A beam of harsh light hit her directly in the face, highlighting the sweat dripping down her neck and the panic in her eyes. "So relaxing," she said through gritted teeth, forcing a laugh. "Just purging the negativity, guys. Just purging the negativity." I closed my laptop. They were sweltering in a prison of their own making, and they were still lying to the world about it. But the heat was just the beginning. The real freeze was coming next. While my family was melting in their smart home sauna on Maple Street, I was sitting in a climate-controlled boardroom 40 floors above the city. The contrast between my two lives had never been sharper. To Deshawn and Ashley, I was the basement dweller who probably stole change from the couch cushions. To the three Japanese investors sitting across from me, I was the CEO of JOR Holdings, the architect of a proprietary cloud infrastructure that was about to secure their banking data for the next decade. I adjusted the cuff of my bespoke Italian blazer. It was a dark navy silk blend that cost more than Ashley's entire wardrobe. The meeting was going perfectly. We were discussing the final terms of the acquisition when the heavy glass doors of the conference room slid open. My executive assistant Sarah walked in. She was usually the picture of composure, but today she looked pale. She was holding a tablet with a trembling hand. "I apologize for the interruption, Ms. Jordan," she whispered, leaning down to my ear. "But our reputation management software just flagged a viral spike. It is a level 5 threat. You need to see this immediately." I excused myself with a polite bow to the investors and stepped out into the hallway. Sarah handed me the tablet. On the screen was an Instagram post from Ashley. It had been posted 40 minutes ago and already had 5,000 likes and hundreds of shares. The image was a crude Photoshop job, but effective enough to fool the gullible. It showed me standing in the driveway yesterday, but she had digitally manipulated my hand. Instead of holding my car keys, she had pasted a grainy image of a hypodermic needle. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction. "My heart breaks today," Ashley had written. "We finally had to ask my sister-in-law to leave our home. We tried to help her through her addiction. We gave her a roof over her head for 5 years. But after I caught her stealing my grandmother's vintage jewelry to buy drugs, I had to draw the line. I have to protect my unborn baby from this toxic environment. Please pray for her recovery, but keep your distance if you see her. She is dangerous." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She was not just kicking me out. She was trying to destroy my future employment prospects. She was trying to paint me as a criminal junkie to cover up the fact that they were broke. Sarah was watching me, waiting for instructions. "Shall I have legal send a cease and desist?" she asked. "Or should we contact the platform to have it removed for defamation?" I zoomed in on the photo. Ashley was not a graphic designer. Her Photoshop skills were amateur at best. In her haste to make me look like a villain, she had forgotten to check the rest of the image. The photo was a selfie she took in the mirror with me in the background, and there it was. Sitting on the vanity table right next to her prenatal vitamins was a large glass of red wine. It was half empty. Next to it was a pack of cigarettes. For a woman claiming to be 6 months pregnant with the golden grandchild of the family, she was certainly relaxed about her health. I handed the tablet back to Sarah and smiled. A cold, calculated smile. "No, Sarah," I said. "Do not report it. Do not take it down." Sarah looked confused. "But Ms. Jordan, these allegations are serious." "They are false," I replied. "But Ashley wants attention. She wants this post to go viral. She wants the world to see her as the victimized mother protecting her child. So let us give her exactly what she wants." I pulled out my phone and logged into our company marketing tools. We had access to some of the most sophisticated search engine optimization and ad targeting algorithms in the world. "I want you to take this post," I told Sarah. "And I want you to boost it. Put $5,000 of ad spend behind it." Sarah's jaw dropped. "You want to pay to promote a lie about yourself?" "Trust me," I said. "But I want you to change the target audience. Do not target her usual circle of fashion bloggers and young influencers. I want you to target the parenting groups, specifically the strict organic hyper-vigilant mothering groups. Target the anti-smoking campaigns. Target the fetal alcohol syndrome awareness groups. Target the conservative church ladies." I watched Sarah's eyes light up as she realized what I was doing. "Weaponized algorithms," she whispered. "Exactly," I said. "Let us see how the internet detectives handle this." I went back into my meeting and closed the deal with the Japanese investors. By the time I walked out an hour later, the internet had done its work. I opened the post again. The comment section had transformed from a support group for Ashley into a war zone. The first few comments were sympathetic, but then the tide turned. "Wait a minute," wrote a user named Karen Mom of 3. "Is that a glass of Merlot next to her belly bump?" I zoomed in, wrote another user. "That is definitely wine. And are those Virginia Slims? I thought you said you were high risk." The comments started flooding in faster than Ashley could delete them. "You are accusing your sister of addiction while you are poisoning your own baby. Child Protective Services needs to see this. Liar. You are not protecting anyone. You are an alcoholic." The narrative had shifted completely. Nobody cared about the girl in the background with the fake needle. They were obsessed with the mother in the foreground poisoning her unborn child. Ashley was being dissected by the most ruthless demographic on the internet, the mommy shamers. Her carefully curated image of the perfect, glowing mother-to-be was disintegrating in real time. I saw comments tagging her brand sponsors. I saw comments tagging the local church. Then my personal phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, putting it on speaker so Sarah could hear. "You witch?" It was Deshaun. He sounded breathless, like he was running. "You hacked her account," he screamed. "I know you did. You photoshopped that wine glass in there. Ashley does not even drink red wine." I leaned back in my leather chair, looking out over the city skyline. "I did not touch her account, Deshaun," I said calmly. "And we both know Ashley drinks whatever is in the bottle. I just made sure her post reached a wider audience. I thought she wanted to be an influencer. I just helped her influence the right people." "She is crying on the bathroom floor," Deshaun yelled. "Her sponsors are dropping her. The organic baby food company just sent us an email terminating her contract. Do you know how much money that was? That was supposed to pay the mortgage." "Correction," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "It was supposed to pay the rent. And since you brought it up, you are late on that too." "You are ruining us," he shouted. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you started a war you are not equipped to fight," I replied. "You tried to ruin my reputation with a lie. I ruined yours with the truth. Now if you will excuse me, I have a company to run." And Deshaun, what he spit out. "Tell Ashley to drink some water. The internet says dehydration is bad for the baby. If there even is a baby." I hung up before he could answer. I looked at Sarah. She was grinning. "The post has been shared 10,000 times," she reported. "But now the hashtag trending with it is, Save the Baby, Not Bad Sister." "Perfect," I said. But the victory was not complete. I knew Deshaun. When he felt cornered, he did not retreat. He doubled down. He would not stop at social media. He would try to take this to the real world. He would try to sue me. And that was exactly where I wanted him. Because in the court of public opinion, you can delete comments. But in a court of law, you cannot delete the truth. I turned to Sarah. "Get the legal team ready," I said. "They are going to serve me with a lawsuit within 48 hours. I want the deed to the Maple Street property ready. I want the bank transfer records from the last 5 years printed out, and get the security footage from the basement server room." "We are going to court?" Sarah asked. "No," I said, standing up and walking to the window. "We are going to a slaughter." While Ashley was busy losing her reputation on the internet, my brother Deshaun decided to seek solace in the one place he thought he was still a king: the basement. He marched down the stairs past the empty spot where my server rack used to stand. He stepped right over the scuff marks on the concrete where Ashley had kicked my life work just 24 hours ago. He did not care about the empty space. He only cared about the hum coming from the far corner of the room. There sat his pride and joy. The mining rig. It was a monstrosity of aluminum frames and zip ties holding together 12 high-end graphics cards that blinked with aggressive RGB lighting. Deshaun called it his passive income generator. He liked to brag to his friends that he was a crypto fintech entrepreneur. He told everyone he was mining Bitcoin and Ethereum, and coins they had never even heard of. The truth was, Deshaun did not know the difference between a blockchain and a bicycle chain. I watched him through the pinhole camera I had installed in the smoke detector years ago. He pulled up a folding chair and sat in front of the rig, wiping sweat from his forehead. The basement was usually cool, but the rig generated an immense amount of heat. Without my climate control system managing the airflow, the room was rapidly becoming an oven. "At least you are still loyal to me," he muttered, patting the metal frame of the rig like it was a dog. "Make me some money, Daddy needs a win today." The fans were spinning at maximum velocity, sounding like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. To Deshaun, that noise was the sound of money. He tapped the spacebar on the monitor, expecting to see his digital wallet balance climbing higher. He frowned. The screen flickered to life. The dashboard was open. The hash rate graphs were spiked high, showing that the cards were working at 100% capacity. They were crunching numbers, solving complex mathematical algorithms, and consuming electricity at a rate that would make a Tesla blush. But the field labeled wallet balance read 0.0000. Deshaun squinted. He tapped the refresh button. 0. He refreshed again. He checked the connection cables. He wiggled the mouse. 0. "Come on, do not do this to me," he growled. He opened the command line terminal. He stared at the scrolling text of code, not understanding a single word of it. He looked for the green text that usually said block reward confirmed. Instead, he saw endless lines of yellow text. Handshake failed. Proxy server unreachable. Work rejected. He did not understand. The lights were on. The fans were spinning. The cards were hot. The machine was working. Why was the money not appearing? I took a sip of water in my hotel room, enjoying the show. Deshaun thought mining was magic. He thought you just plugged a computer into the wall and money came out. He did not know that I had configured his entire operation to run through my server. You see, mining requires a connection to a pool. And to keep his insecure amateur setup safe from hackers, I had routed all his traffic through a private proxy on my local server. My server acted as the gatekeeper. It took the work his machine did, verified it, and submitted it to the blockchain. Then it took the reward and deposited it into his wallet. When he kicked me out, he kicked out the gatekeeper. Now his machine was screaming into the void. It was doing the math. It was using the power. It was generating the heat. But without my server to submit the work, the blockchain did not even know he existed. He was essentially burning money to heat up a basement that was already too hot. Deshaun pulled out his phone and dialed the number of the guy who sold him the graphics cards. "Yo, man, the rig is bugging out," Deshaun shouted over the noise of the fans. "It says work rejected. What does that mean?" I could not hear the other end of the call, but I saw Deshaun face drop. "What do you mean network configuration? I did not touch the network. My sister. No, she is gone. She took her computer, but this is my computer. Why does my computer need her computer to talk to the internet?" He listened for another minute, his eyes widening in horror. "So you are telling me it is running for nothing? It is just burning electricity?" He hung up the phone. He looked at the rig. It was roaring, happily oblivious to the fact that it was bankrupting its owner. He reached down to turn it off. Ping! His phone chimed with a notification. It was the Georgia Power app. Deshaun froze. He looked at the screen. Because I had reset the smart home system to factory settings, I had also removed the administrative override that categorized the basement power usage under my business account. For 5 years, I had registered the house as a small data center, allowing us to qualify for the industrial power rate, which is significantly cheaper than the residential rate. That registration was tied to my LLC. When I left, the registration left with me. The automated system had detected the massive power spike from the mining rig running 24/7, and since it was no longer shielded by my business cap, the utility company had automatically switched the billing to the Tier 3 high-usage residential bracket. Deshaun stared at the notification. "Your monthly bill statement is ready. Total amount due, $3,842.15. His knees gave out. He actually fell out of the folding chair and hit the concrete floor. $3,000, he whispered. $3,000. That was more than the mortgage. That was more than he made in 2 months selling insurance. He scrambled up and ran for the stairs, forgetting to turn off the rig. He sprinted up to the living room, waving his phone like a weapon. "Mom! Dad, look at this!" he screamed. Betty and Calvin were sitting in the dark living room, trying to cool off with paper fans. They jumped when Deshawn burst in. "What is it now?" Betty asked, wiping sweat from her neck. "Did Ashley fix the internet? Look at the power bill." Deshawn shrieked, shoving the phone into her face. $3,800 for 1 month. Betty grabbed the phone. She squinted at the numbers. Her face went pale under her makeup. She gasped, clutching her chest. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "This has to be a mistake. Our bill is never more than $300. Jordan always handled the utilities. She said she got a discount." "She did not get a discount," Deshawn yelled, pacing around the room. "She was paying it. Or she was doing something to the meter. And now she is gone and they are charging us for everything." Betty looked at the bill again. She looked at the darkened lights of the house. She looked at the useless smart thermostat on the wall. The reality was too much for her to process. She could not accept that her daughter, the failure, had been subsidizing their entire existence. It was easier to believe in a villain than to admit she was wrong. "She stole it," Betty whispered, her eyes rolling back slightly. "What?" Deshawn asked. "She stole the electricity," Betty shouted, standing up with sudden hysterical energy. "That girl is a hacker. She is sitting in some hotel room right now tapping into our lines. She is siphoning our power to run her devil machines. That is why the bill is so high. She is stealing from us even when she is not here." It was absurd. It was technically impossible. But it fit the narrative they needed. "She is trying to bankrupt us," Calvin roared, slamming his fist on the table. "I knew she was vindictive." "Call the police," Betty cried, swaying on her feet. "Tell them your sister is stealing electricity remotely. Tell them to arrest her." Deshawn looked at his mother. Even he knew that sounded crazy. But then he looked at the bill again. $3,800. He did not have it. His credit cards were maxed out. Ashley had just lost her contracts. He needed a scapegoat. And Jordan had always been the scapegoat. "You are right," Deshawn lied. "She must be hacking the meter. There is no way we used this much power." Betty clutched the phone to her chest. "Oh, Lord," she wailed. "I gave birth to a monster. She wants to see us live in the dark." And then the heat and the shock were finally too much. Betty's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the beige carpet in a faint, her paper fan fluttering to the floor beside her. Mom, Deshawn yelled, rushing to her side. Calvin stood up, pointing a shaking finger at the ceiling. "I am going to kill her," he shouted at no one. "I am going to sue her for every penny she has stolen." I watched it all on my screen. I saw my mother faint, not from heat stroke, but from the realization that the free ride was over. I saw my father threaten me with a lawsuit he could not afford. I closed the browser tab. "You want to sue me?" I whispered to the screen. "Go ahead. I have the receipts, all of them." I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. "It is time to move to phase 2, I said. "They are accusing me of theft. Prepare the counter-filing and get the eviction notice ready. I think the current tenants are violating the lease agreement by modifying the electrical usage." The game was over. Now it was time for the execution. While my brother was hyperventilating over a $3,000 electric bill, his wife Ashley was trying to solve her problems the only way she knew how. By spending money she did not have. After the disaster with the heating system and the brutal roasting she received on social media, Ashley decided she needed a rebrand. She needed to prove to her followers and herself that she was still the queen bee of the neighborhood. She put on her oversized designer sunglasses, tied a silk scarf around her neck, and drove her leased Range Rover to the most expensive place in town, Whole Foods. But she did not go to the regular one. She drove 20 minutes to the flagship store in Buckhead, the one where celebrities and professional athletes shopped. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be photographed. She wanted to show the world that despite the rumors, the Wilson family was doing just fine. I sat in my hotel room watching the transaction attempts roll in on my banking app like a ticker tape of desperation. Attempted charge, Whole Foods Market, $412. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of sparkling water. This was going to be good. I could picture the scene perfectly because I knew Ashley's routine. She would have grabbed the shiny metal cart and strutted down the aisles like it was a runway. She would have tossed items in without looking at the price tags. Manuka honey from New Zealand, white truffles, Wagyu beef steaks, cold pressed kale juice that cost $12 a bottle. She wasn't shopping for sustenance. She was shopping for content. She was building a prop set for her next lie. She probably spent 20 minutes in the floral department picking out the perfect bouquet of hydrangeas to stage in the background of her apology video. She likely grabbed a few expensive magazines to place casually on the coffee table. She was building a facade of wealth to hide the rotting foundation of her reality. When she reached the checkout line, she made sure to choose the lane with the most people. She wanted an audience. She wanted the other women in their yoga pants and diamonds to see her unloading premium goods. She wanted them to envy her. I imagine she was on the phone, probably talking loudly to a fake assistant, or maybe her mother, ensuring everyone within earshot knew she was busy and important. The cashier, a tired teenager named Sarah, began scanning the items. Beep, beep, beep. The total climbed higher and higher. 200, 300, 400. Ashley didn't even look at the screen. She reached into her Louis Vuitton purse and pulled out the heavy platinum American Express card. This card was legendary in our family. Technically, it was a supplementary card issued under my primary account. I had given it to my mother Betty 5 years ago for medical emergencies. I told her it was for life or death situations only. Naturally, my mother had defined life or death as keeping up appearances, so she had secretly passed the card to Ashley whenever Ashley needed to feel rich. Ashley tapped the card on the reader with a flourish, not even breaking her conversation on the phone. Authorizing. The machine thought for a moment. Then it let out a harsh buzzing sound. Transaction declined. Ashley paused. She frowned at the machine and tapped the card again, harder this time, as if percussive maintenance would fix her credit limit. Authorizing. Buzz. Transaction declined. Excuse me, Ashley said, snapping at the cashier. Your machine is broken. This is a platinum card. It does not have a limit. Try it again. The cashier sighed and typed in the numbers manually. Buzz. Declined. Ma'am, the system is rejecting the payment, the cashier said, loud enough for the people in line to hear. Do you have another form of payment? Ashley's face turned red. She could feel the eyes of the women behind her boring into her back. These were the same type of women who tore her apart in the comments section yesterday. She could not afford to look broke in front of them. Do not be ridiculous. Ashley scoffed, her voice rising an octave. That card is perfectly fine. I just used it yesterday. Call your manager. Clearly, you do not know how to handle a premium account. The cashier shrugged and pressed the button for the manager. A stern-looking woman in a blazer walked over. What seems to be the problem? The manager asked. Your employee is incompetent, Ashley spat. My card is being declined and she refuses to override it. I am a very important customer. I demand you fix this immediately. The manager took the card from Ashley's hand. She looked at the name on the front. It said, Betty Wilson. Then she looked at the back. She walked over to her terminal and swiped it through her administrative system. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked up at Ashley, not with an apology, but with a look of cold suspicion. Ma'am, do you have identification that matches this card? The manager asked. It is my mother-in-law. Card? Ashley stammered. She gave it to me to buy groceries for the family dinner, I see, the manager said. Well, I am afraid I cannot return this card to you, and I cannot complete this transaction. What are you talking about? Ashley shrieked, reaching for the card. Give that back to me. That is my property. No, ma'am, it is not, the manager said, stepping back and holding the card out of reach. According to our system, this card was reported lost or stolen yesterday evening by the primary account holder. The instructions from American Express are to confiscate the card and destroy it immediately. The silence that fell over the checkout lane was deafening. Stolen, Ashley whispered. The women in line behind her gasped. I can imagine the whispers. Did you hear that? She is using a stolen card. Is that the woman from Instagram who drinks while pregnant? I heard she stole jewelry too. Ashley looked around wildly. Her facade was cracking. The narrative of the wealthy influencer was shattering into a million pieces, leaving only the reality of a thief. That is a mistake, she yelled, but her voice lacked conviction. My sister-in-law did this. She is crazy. She is trying to sabotage me. Call the police. No, do not call the police. Just let me pay with a different card. She fumbled in her purse, pulling out her own debit card. She shoved it into the reader. Insufficient funds. She pulled out a Target credit card. Declined. She pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. It was not enough to cover even the Wagyu beef. Ma'am, the manager said, her voice dropping to a steely tone. You are holding up the line. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the groceries and exit the store. If you continue to cause a scene, I will have security escort you out, and we will be contacting the authorities regarding the attempted use of a stolen instrument. Ashley looked at the cart full of truffle oil and organic kale. She looked at the line of judgmental faces. She looked at the manager holding the platinum card like a weapon. She did not argue. She did not strut. She grabbed her purse and ran. She ran out of the automatic doors, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She left the cart right there in the middle of the lane, a monument to her failure. Back in my hotel room, I watched the notifications stop. I picked up my phone and called the American Express concierge. Hello, this is Jordan, I said smoothly. I just wanted to thank you for your fraud protection services. I believe someone tried to use the card I reported missing. Yes, Ms. Jordan, the representative replied. The attempt was made at a Whole Foods in Buckhead. The card has been secured by the merchant. Would you like us to issue a replacement for your mother? I paused. I thought about my mother standing in the dark watching her husband scream at the ceiling. I thought about her handing that card to Ashley knowing it was supposed to be for emergencies only. No, I said. Do not issue a replacement. I think it is time my family learned to live on a cash basis. Close the supplementary account entirely, please. As I hung up, I could picture Ashley sitting in her Range Rover in the parking lot crying into her steering wheel. She had gone in there to feed her ego, and she had come out starving. But the day was not over. Ashley had failed at the grocery store, but she still had an appointment at the Aura Spa across the street, a $200 facial she had booked weeks ago to help her relax. I watched the GPS tracker on her car move across the street. She was a glutton for punishment. She thought maybe, just maybe, the spa had her card on file and it would still work. 10 minutes later, another notification popped up. Attempted charge Aura Spa, $250, declined. Then 5 minutes later, a frantic text from Ashley appeared on my blocked messages folder. I am at the spa and I cannot pay. They are threatening to call the cops. Jordan, please, I will do anything. I looked at the message. Anything. That was a dangerous word to use with someone who held all the cards. I did not reply. I let her figure it out. Maybe she could wash towels for a few hours. After all, she needed a real job. I turned off my phone and ordered room service. Lobster thermidor. Paid for with my platinum card, which worked perfectly fine. The law office of Saul Goodmanstein was not located in a glass skyscraper downtown. It was sandwiched between a discount vape shop and a payday lender in a crumbling strip mall on the edge of town. The neon sign in the window flickered with a buzzing sound that was loud enough to give anyone a migraine. It read simply, Accident, Injury, Justice. The word justice was only half illuminated. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and old carpet. My brother Deshaun sat on a peeling faux leather chair, his knee bouncing up and down with nervous energy. Beside him, my parents Calvin and Betty looked out of place in their Sunday best clothes. They held their heads high, trying to maintain an air of dignity in a room that screamed desperation. They were not there for an accident. They were there for a robbery. They just called it a lawsuit. The door to the inner office opened and Saul walked out. He was a short man with slicked back hair and a suit that was too shiny under the fluorescent lights. He did not look like a man who won Supreme Court cases. He looked like a man who knew how to twist a knife in a street fight. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, come on in," Saul said, waving them into his cluttered office. "And this must be the brother, Deshaun Wright, the insurance mogul." Deshaun puffed out his chest, ignoring the irony that he was currently unemployed and facing a $4,000 electric bill. "That is right," Deshaun said, shaking Saul's hand firmly. "We are here because we have a situation, a family matter that requires a firm hand." They sat down. Deshaun placed a folder on the desk. It contained the eviction notice I had verbally given them, the printout of the electric bill, and a stack of screenshots from my Instagram showing the view from my hotel room. "Let me tell you what happened," Saul said, leaning back in his creaking chair. "You have a daughter, Jordan. She lived in your house for 5 years. She lived in our basement," my mother corrected, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "We took her in when she had nothing. We fed her. We clothed her. We gave her a safe harbor. And how does she repay us? By hacking our electricity and terrorizing her pregnant sister-in-law." Saul nodded, pretending to take notes on a yellow legal pad. "And she never paid rent?" Saul asked, looking over his glasses. "Never, my father," Calvin said, slamming his hand on the armrest. "Not a dime. She claimed she was saving up. She claimed she was broke. But look at these pictures." He shoved the Instagram screenshots across the desk. "She is staying at the Four Seasons." Saul whistled low. "That is $1,000 a night. At least." "She has been hiding money from us," Deshaun said, his voice dripping with venom. "She has been hoarding wealth while we struggled to pay the mortgage. While I worked myself to the bone, she was sitting in that basement counting her secret stash. That money belongs to the family. It is reimbursement for 5 years of room and board." Saul picked up the electric bill. "And this bill. You say she caused this. She hacked the meter." Betty sobbed. "She is a computer genius or something. She rigged it to punish us. And she attacked Ashley. My daughter-in-law is bedridden with stress. She is high risk. The doctor said any more shock could cause her to lose the baby." This was a lie, of course. Ashley was currently at home, eating a pint of ice cream and watching Netflix, but to them the lie had become the truth because it served their purpose. Saul's smile widened. He smelled blood in the water. He did not care if the accusations were true. He only cared that there was a target with deep pockets at the Four Seasons. "Here is what we are going to do," Saul said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "In the state of Georgia, we have very specific laws about tenancy. Even if there was no written lease, if she lived there, she established a tenancy at will." He tapped the desk with a pen. "Now, usually you cannot demand back rent if there was no agreement. However, we can argue that there was a verbal contract, an implied agreement that she would contribute to household expenses. By hiding her assets, she committed fraud. She acted in bad faith." Deshaun nodded eagerly, absorbing the twisted legal logic. "Fraud? Exactly. She defrauded us. But that is not the big-ticket item," Saul continued, his eyes gleaming. "The big ticket is the emotional distress. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. We call it IIED. By hacking the house systems, by raising the heat on a pregnant woman, by siphoning power, she engaged in outrageous conduct intended to cause severe suffering." He looked at Betty. "Mrs. Wilson, did you feel like you were having a heart attack when you saw that bill?" "I did," Betty cried. "I nearly died. I fainted right on the floor." "There you go," Saul said, pointing his pen at her. "That is physical manifestation of emotional trauma. We can sue for medical damages. We can sue for the pain and suffering of the unborn child. We can sue for the retroactive rent based on fair market value of a finished basement suite. Let us say $2,000 a month for 60 months. That is $120,000 just for the rent. 120,000. The number hung in the air like a winning lottery ticket. My father sat up straighter. My mother stopped crying. Deshaun looked like he had just been handed the keys to a Ferrari, plus punitive damages, Saul added. To punish her, to teach her a lesson. We could easily ask for $500,000. $500,000. They did not see a lawsuit. They saw a salvation. They saw a way to pay off the mortgage, to clear Deshaun credit card debt, to restore Ashley's reputation. They saw a way to strip me of everything I had built and put me back in my place. But there is a problem, Deshaun said, his excitement dampening slightly. We do not have money for a retainer. We are a little liquid constrained at the moment because of her theft. Saul waved his hand dismissively. Do not worry about that. I take cases like this on contingency. I take 40% of the settlement. You do not pay a dime until we win. I just need a small filing fee of $500 to get the paperwork into the court system tomorrow. Deshaun looked at his parents. $500 was still a lot of money for them right now, but the return on investment was insane. $500,000. I can sell my golf clubs, Calvin said quietly. I can pawn my wedding ring for a few days, Betty whispered, just until the settlement comes through. No, Deshaun said, standing up. I will do it. I will sell the mining rig. It is useless without her server anyway. I will sell it for parts. It is worth $500. He looked at Saul with a look of pure arrogance. File the papers, he ordered. Serve her at the hotel. I want to see the look on her face when the sheriff hands her the lawsuit. Saul grinned and shook Deshaun's hand. You are doing the right thing, son. This is about justice. This is about family values. They walked out of the office into the humid afternoon air feeling like kings. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow light on their faces. Deshaun pulled out his phone and texted Ashley. Get ready, baby. We are going to be rich. The lawyer said we have a slam dunk case. He looked at his parents, who were smiling for the first time in days. She thought she could leave us, Deshaun said, laughing. She thought she could just walk away and disrespect us. He clenched his fist, imagining me reading the lawsuit, imagining me scared and crying, imagining me crawling back to the house to beg for forgiveness. She is going to learn today, Deshaun said. She is going to have to crawl back here on her knees, apologize to all of us, and vomit up every single cent she has. Calvin nodded in agreement. It is the Lord way, son. Pride cometh before the fall, and she has been very proud. They got into Deshaun's car, oblivious to the fact that the GPS tracker under the bumper was logging their location. Oblivious to the fact that I had already alerted my legal team that a frivolous filing was imminent. Oblivious to the fact that by filing this lawsuit they were not opening a door to riches. They were opening a trap door. And they were standing right on top of it. Back in the hotel room, I received a notification from my private investigator. Subject Deshaun Wilson. Location Saul Goodmanstein Law Office. Duration 45 minutes. I put down my coffee cup. So they actually did it, I whispered to the empty room. They actually hired Saul. I picked up my phone and called the best real estate attorney in Atlanta, a woman who charged more per hour than Saul made in a month. Hello, Patricia, I said. It is Jordan. Prepare the foreclosure documents and find the original deed of trust. The one with my signature on it. We are going to court. I walked to the window and looked down at the city. Deshaun wanted a show. He wanted a battle. He wanted to drag me into the mud. He did not realize that I owned the mud. I owned the ground. And very soon I would own the very air he breathed. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for them to jump. The lobby of the Apex Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, echoing with the confident footsteps of Atlanta tech elite. I walked through the revolving doors, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished marble floor. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that commanded respect, the kind of outfit that whispered power rather than shouted it. Security guards nodded as I passed their station, acknowledging the CEO of the company that designed their surveillance systems. But standing near the reception desk was a man who clearly did not belong. He wore a faded windbreaker, and comfortable sneakers, the universal uniform of a process server. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, looking uncomfortable amidst the bespoke suits and designer briefcases. When he saw me swipe my badge at the turnstile, he stepped forward, blocking my path. "Excuse me," he said, holding up a manila envelope. "Are you Jordan Wilson?" I stopped and looked at him over the rim of my sunglasses. "I am." He thrust the envelope toward me with a smirk that suggested he enjoyed ruining people's days. "You have been served. Don't shoot the messenger, lady. I just deliver the bad news." He turned and walked away, whistling a tune, clearly thinking he had just handed an eviction notice to a struggling employee. I looked down at the envelope. It was thick, heavy. My brother had been busy. I stepped into the private executive elevator and pressed the button for the 45th floor. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the lobby, I slid a manicured finger under the flap of the envelope and tore it open. I started reading as the elevator ascended. Plaintiff Deshaun Wilson and Calvin Wilson. Defendant Jordan Wilson. The legal jargon was clumsy, clearly drafted by a lawyer who chased ambulances for a living, but the numbers were crystal clear. They were suing me for $120,000 in retroactive rent. They claimed a verbal contract existed. They claimed unjust enrichment. And then the kicker. Count 2. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. They were demanding $150,000 for the trauma I supposedly caused Ashley. The document cited extreme anguish, public humiliation, and the risk of miscarriage due to the sudden loss of electricity. I laughed. A genuine cold laugh that bounced off the mirrored walls of the elevator. They were suing me for emotional distress because I stopped paying their bills. They were suing me for back rent on a house they had lost to the bank 6 years ago. They were trying to extract money from the very person who had secretly kept a roof over their heads. The elevator chimed and the doors opened, revealing the reception area of my company. My executive assistant looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Ms. Jordan. Your 10 o'clock strategy meeting is ready." "Cancel it," I said, walking past her desk without breaking stride. "And get Patricia from legal in my office. Immediately. Tell her to bring the physical file for Project Black House." Project Black House was the internal code name for the property on Maple Street. For 5 years, it had been a dormant file, a charitable write-off on my company ledger. Today, it was becoming an active asset. I walked into my corner office and threw the lawsuit onto my mahogany desk. The view from here was breathtaking, a sprawling panorama of the city I helped build. Somewhere down there in the suburbs, my family was probably celebrating right now. Deshaun was likely popping a bottle of cheap champagne, thinking he had checkmated me. He thought the lawsuit would scare me into settling. He thought I would be terrified of a public court battle. He forgot that I deal in data, not drama. And the data was entirely on my side. Patricia, my chief legal officer, walked in a moment later holding a black binder. She was a sharp woman, with a mind like a steel trap. She looked at the lawsuit on my desk and picked it up. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked, scanning the pages. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water. "It is. They are suing me for back rent, Patricia. They are suing JOR Holdings for rent on a property that JOR Holdings owns." Patricia let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Do they know?" "No," I said, sitting down in my leather chair. "They think the owner is some faceless corporation. They think I was just a squatter in their basement. They have no idea that the initials JOR stand for Jordan Owner and Ruler." Patricia shook her head, flipping through the pages of the lawsuit. "This is the most reckless legal filing I have ever seen. They have admitted in sworn documents that they believe they have the right to collect rent. By doing so, they are claiming ownership of a property they do not own. That is fraud, Jordan. We can crush them just with this." I swiveled my chair to face the window, looking down at the ant-sized cars on the highway. "I do not just want to win the lawsuit, Patricia. I want to end the charade. They want to talk about rent. Fine, let us talk about rent." I spun back around, opened the binder. Patricia placed the black binder on the desk. Inside were the original foreclosure documents from 6 years ago, the bank seizure notice for Calvin and Betty Wilson, the auction receipt where my company purchased the debt for pennies on the dollar, and the deed. The deed that had my signature on the bottom line, not as a tenant, but as the proprietor. For 5 years I had let them play house. I had let my father pretend he was still the patriarch. I had let my mother pretend she was the queen of her castle. I did it because despite everything I wanted them to have dignity. I wanted them to have a home. But dignity is a two-way street, and they had just paved over it with greed. Activate the termination clause, I said, my voice steady. The lease agreement was a standard month-to-month tenancy at will granted by JOR Holdings to the occupants. It clearly states that the landlord can terminate the agreement with 24 hours' notice in the event of property damage or illegal activity. Patricia nodded, pulling a document from the back of the binder. Ashley kicking the server rack constitutes property damage, and attempting to defraud the true owner via a frivolous lawsuit constitutes malicious intent. Exactly, I said. They want to drag me into court. I will meet them there. But they won't be meeting Jordan the sister. They will be meeting Jordan the landlord. Patricia slid a document across the desk toward me. It was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. The header read, "Notice to quit and demand for possession." It was an eviction notice, but not just any eviction notice. This was a commercial termination of a charitable lease. It demanded immediate vacation of the premises. I picked up my fountain pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. This wasn't just ink on paper. This was a guillotine blade falling on 5 years of lies. When I sign this, I asked Patricia, "What happens next?" Patricia smiled a shark-like smile. "Once you sign this, we file it with the county clerk immediately. Since they have already filed a lawsuit against you, we can file this as a countermotion. We can request an emergency hearing. The sheriff will be at their door within 48 hours to remove them. And because they filed the lawsuit claiming ownership, they have trapped themselves. When we prove they don't own it, they will be liable for your legal fees and potentially criminal fraud charges." I looked at the signature line at the bottom of the page. Landlord's signature. I thought about the heat in the basement. I thought about the trash bag Deshawn threw at me. I thought about the way my mother looked at me when the police were called. I uncapped the pen. The nib scratched against the paper loud in the silent office. Jordan Wilson, CEO, JOR Holdings. I set the pen down. "File it," I said, "and send a copy to their lawyer. Let Saul Goodmanstein know that his clients are currently trespassing on the defendant property." Patricia closed the binder with a satisfying snap. "Consider it done." I watched her leave the office. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my desk. The lawsuit lay in the trash bin where I had tossed it. They wanted their day in court. I was going to give them a lifetime of regret. The pieces were moving on the board, and my family was celebrating a checkmate while their king was already surrounded. They just didn't know it yet. The morning of the hearing, the Fulton County Courthouse steps looked less like a hall of justice and more like the red carpet of a reality television show launch party. I watched the spectacle from the tinted back window of my SUV, which was parked across the street. The air conditioning was humming softly, a stark contrast to the humid Atlanta heat that was already causing my brother Deshawn to sweat through his suit. Deshawn and Ashley had clearly coordinated their outfits for their big day in court. They were aiming for sympathetic victim chic, but they had landed somewhere closer to televangelist fraud. Deshawn was wearing a pastel blue suit that was too tight in the shoulders, paired with a white loafers that looked ridiculous against the gray concrete of the courthouse steps. Ashley was wearing an oversized white dress that I assume was meant to emphasize her delicate condition and the non-existent baby bump. She had accessorized with a large wooden cross necklace that I had never seen her wear a single day in her life. They were not standing in line for security like normal litigants. Instead, they had set up a tripod right in the middle of the pedestrian walkway, blocking the path of busy attorneys and stressed-out clerks. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Sure enough, the notification popped up immediately. Deshaun Wilson is live. The caption read, "David versus Goliath, fighting for our family." I tapped on the video. The audio was slightly distorted by the wind, but their voices were shrill and clear. "Hey guys, thanks for tuning in," Ashley said, looking mournfully into the camera lens. She dabbed at a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. "We are just moments away from walking into that building and facing our abuser. It is so hard to be here. I literally had to take medication to keep my heart rate down for the baby's sake." Deshaun stepped into the frame, putting a protective arm around her. He looked directly at the camera, his jaw set in a practiced expression of righteous indignation. "We are doing this for every family out there who has been taken advantage of," he declared. "My sister Jordan, she thinks she can use her money and her corporate lawyers to bully us. She thinks she can just throw her own parents out on the street because she is having a temper tantrum. But we are here to say enough is enough." The comments were flying up the side of the screen. "Amen, brother. Stay strong, Ashley. God don't like ugly, she will get hers." It was a masterclass in manipulation. They had successfully spun the narrative that I was the wealthy aggressor, and they were the humble victims fighting for their survival. They conveniently left out the part where they sued me first. They left out the part where they had lived rent-free for 5 years. They left out the part where Ashley kicked a $45,000 server because it messed up her feng shui. I shifted my gaze from the phone screen to the sidewalk. A local blogger named Tiffany, who ran a gossip site called the Atlanta Tea, was standing there with a microphone. Deshaun had evidently tipped her off. My father Calvin was stepping up to the microphone now. He had put on his best Sunday suit, the one he usually reserved for Easter service. He looked dignified if you ignored the fact that he was publicly slandering his own daughter to a woman holding an iPhone on a gimbal. "Mr. Wilson," Tiffany asked, shoving the microphone toward him, "how does it feel to be dragged into court by your own child?" Calvin shook his head slowly, looking at the ground, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "It is a tragedy," my father said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "It is a failure of parenting, honestly. Her mother and I, we loved Jordan too much. That was our sin. We coddled her. We let her stay in our basement when she could not find work. We shielded her from the harsh realities of the world. And this is how she repays us. With cruelty." He looked up at the camera, his eyes wet. "I just want her to learn responsibility," he continued. "You cannot just go through life hurting people because you are unhappy with yourself. I am praying that the judge will force her to see reason. We do not want to hurt her. We just want what is fair. We want the home that we built to be respected." I felt a cold knot of anger tighten in my stomach. The home that we built. He had not paid a mortgage payment since 2015. He had not paid for a roof repair. He had not paid for the water heater replacement last winter. I had built that home. I had saved it from the auction block. And now he was standing there rewriting history to feed his own ego. My lawyer Patricia sat next to me in the car, flipping through her notes. She looked out the window at the circus and raised an eyebrow. "They are trying to try this case in the court of public opinion," she said dryly. "Let them," I replied, smoothing the skirt of my black suit. "The court of public opinion does not have subpoena power." "It is time," Patricia said, checking her watch. "Do you want to use the side entrance to avoid them?" I looked at Deshaun, checking his viewer count on the phone screen. I looked at Ashley, posing for a thumbnail picture. I looked at my parents, basking in the attention of the 3 strangers who had stopped to listen. "No," I said. "I have nothing to hide. Pull up to the front." "Marcus." My driver nodded and eased the large black SUV to the curb directly in front of where they were filming. The arrival of the expensive vehicle caught their attention. Deshaun turned the camera toward the car, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of a celebrity. Instead, the door opened and I stepped out. The silence that fell over my family was immediate. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the shock in their eyes. They were used to seeing Jordan, the girl in the hoodie, the girl in the basement, the girl who looked tired and messy. They were not ready for Jordan, the CEO. I was wearing a tailored Givenchy suit that cost more than Deshaun Carr. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. I wore dark sunglasses that completely hid my eyes. I stood tall, my posture perfect, radiating an aura of absolute control. Deshaun lowered the phone slightly, his mouth hanging open. Ashley stopped dabbing her eyes. My father took a step back. Is that her?" the blogger asked, pointing her camera at me. I did not look at them. I did not acknowledge their presence. I did not stop to defend myself against their lies. To engage with them would be to validate their delusion that we were equals in this fight. I walked past them. "Jordan," my mother called out, her voice cracking. "Jordan, how can you wear that expensive suit when your brother is suffering?" I kept walking, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. "You think you are better than us," Deshaun shouted, finding his voice again. He turned the camera back to himself, realizing he was losing the narrative. "Look at her, guys. Look at how cold she is. She walks right past her crying mother. That is the face of a narcissist." I could hear him shouting as I ascended the stairs, but his voice sounded small and tinny in the vast open air. Patricia walked beside me, her briefcase heavy with the evidence that would destroy them. "They have no idea, do they?" she whispered. "No," I said, as I reached for the heavy brass handle of the courthouse door. "They think this is a reality show. They think the loudest person wins." I pulled the door open, and the cool air of the courthouse rushed out to meet us, smelling of floor wax and old paper. "They are about to find out that in here facts scream louder than feelings," I said. I stepped inside, leaving the heat and the lies behind me. The heavy door swung shut, cutting off the sound of Deshaun begging for likes. The circus was outside, but the execution chamber was inside, and I was the one holding the switch. The interior of courtroom 4B smelled of lemon furniture polish and old anxiety. It was a windowless room with heavy oak paneling that was supposed to inspire reverence for the law, but today it merely served as the stage for a farce. I sat at the defense table, my hands folded calmly on the polished wood surface. To my right sat Patricia, my chief legal counsel, who was currently scrolling through her iPad with the bored expression of a woman who charged $800 an hour to watch a circus act. Across the aisle, the plaintiff table was a flurry of activity. My brother Deshaun was whispering frantically to his lawyer Saul. Ashley was sitting in the front row of the gallery, clutching a tissue she did not need, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. My parents Calvin and Betty sat beside her, looking like tragic figures from a Dickens novel. My mother had actually worn a shawl, a garment I had never seen her own in 30 years, to appear frail and elderly. The bailiff called the court to order, and the Honorable Judge Miller entered. He was a stern man with thick reading glasses and a hairline that had retreated in surrender to gravity. He looked tired. He looked like a man who wanted to get through the docket and go to lunch. Deshaun's lawyer Saul stood up. He adjusted his tie, which was a shade of purple that should be illegal, and buttoned his jacket, which strained against his midsection. "Your Honor." Saul began, his voice booming in the quiet room. "We are here today to rectify a grievous wrong. We are here to speak for two loving parents who sacrificed their golden years to support an adult child who refused to launch. We are here to discuss the defendant, Jordan Wilson." He pointed a finger at me. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I simply observed him the way a scientist observes a bacteria sample under a microscope. For 5 years, Saul continued pacing back and forth in front of the judge's bench. This woman lived in the finished basement of my client's home, a suite that would easily rent for $2,000 a month in this market. Did she pay rent? No. Did she contribute to groceries? No. Did she help with the utilities? No. He paused for dramatic effect. Deshaun nodded vigorously from the table. Instead, Saul said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "She leached off them. She used their electricity to run high-powered computer equipment. She ate their food, she accepted their charity. And when asked to finally contribute, she retaliated with a campaign of digital terror." Judge Miller looked over his glasses at me. I remained impassive. My face was a mask of professional indifference. I was wearing a black suit from the row, simple, severe, and impeccably tailored. It was the kind of armor you wear when you know you are untouchable. Saul walked back to his table and picked up a stack of papers. "Your Honor, the defense may argue that she had no money. They may argue that she was destitute. But we have proof that she was not only capable of paying, but she maliciously chose not to. Furthermore, we have proof that my clients bore the full financial burden of the household alone." He approached the bench. "I would like to submit into evidence Plaintiff Exhibit A. These are copies of the utility bills for the past 5 years. As you can see, they are all in the name of Calvin Wilson. They show consistent payments made from his personal checking account." The bailiff took the papers and handed a copy to Patricia. She slid them over to me. I looked at the documents. At first glance, they looked legitimate. They had the Georgia Power logo, they had the correct address, they had my father's name. But I work in data. I spend my life looking for anomalies in code, and these documents were full of them. I ran my finger over the date column. The font was slightly different than the rest of the bill. It was subtle, perhaps imperceptible to the naked eye of an overworked judge, but to me, it was screaming. The kerning between the numbers was uneven. The pixelation on the dollar amounts was jagged, suggesting they had been cut and pasted from a different source. I realized what Deshaun had done. He had taken an old bill from before I moved in, scanned it, and used a PDF editor to change the dates. He was trying to prove he paid the bills by forging documents that erased my name from the history. It was clumsy, it was desperate, and it was a felony. I looked over at Deshaun. He was smirking at me, thinking he had trapped me. He thought that because I had paid the bills digitally, there would be no paper trail. He forgot that digital footprints are eternal. Patricia leaned over to me. "Do you want to object?" she whispered. "These are clearly doctored." "No," I whispered back, not taking my eyes off the judge. "Let them dig the hole deeper." Saul continued his opening statement, oblivious to the fact that he had just submitted perjured evidence. "Your Honor, this is a case of unjust enrichment. The defendant lived in luxury while her parents scraped by. And now she sits there in a suit that probably costs more than my client's car, refusing to acknowledge her debt. We are asking for judgment in the amount of $120,000 for back rent, plus damages for the emotional distress caused to the family." He turned to look at me again. "Shame on you, Miss Wilson," he said. "Shame on you for treating your family like this." He sat down looking pleased with himself. Ashley let out a small, audible sob in the gallery. My mother patted her hand bravely. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Judge Miller turned his attention to our table. He looked at me expecting the outbursts or the denials that usually accompanied family disputes. He expected drama. He expected tears. Instead, he saw a woman checking her watch. "Does the defense have an opening statement?" Judge Miller asked. Patricia looked at me. I nodded. I stood up. The chair scraped softly against the floor, the only sound in the room. I buttoned my jacket and walked to the center of the room. I did not bring any papers. I did not bring any notes. I did not need them. I stood in front of the judge's bench. I felt the eyes of my family boring into my back. They were waiting for me to beg. They were waiting for me to say I was sorry. They were waiting for me to claim poverty. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and steady, echoing slightly in the wood-paneled room. I listened very carefully to the plaintiff's statement. I reviewed the documents they submitted, and I must say it is a very compelling story. I turned slightly to look at Deshaun. His smile faltered. "The story of an ungrateful daughter sponging off her hard-working parents is a classic tragedy," I continued. If it were true, I would agree that judgment should be rendered. If I were a guest in their home, then certainly I should have contributed. I paused, letting the silence stretch. However, I said, turning back to the judge, this entire lawsuit rests on a single foundational premise. It rests on the premise that Calvin and Betty Wilson are the owners of the property at 45 Maple Street. It rests on the premise that they had the legal right to charge rent. Judge Miller frowned. He looked at the lawsuit. Well, presumably they are the owners, he said. They are the parents. It is the family home. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. Presumption is dangerous in a court of law. Your Honor, I said. The plaintiff claims I owe them rent, but one can only owe rent to a landlord. One can only be evicted by an owner. I took a step closer to the bench. I have no defense against the claim that I lived there. I have no defense against the claim that I did not pay them rent. I did not pay them because you do not pay rent to your tenants. The room went deadly silent. Deshawn stood up halfway. Objection! Saul shouted, jumping to his feet. Relevancy. What is she talking about? I ignored him. I looked directly at my father, who was suddenly looking very pale. I have no opening statement, Your Honor, I said. I have no emotional plea. I have only one question for the plaintiff. I turned around and faced my family. I looked at the fake tears on Ashley's face. I looked at the greed in Deshawn's eyes. I looked at the fear starting to dawn on my mother's face. I looked at Calvin Wilson. Mr. Wilson, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. Do you know whose name is on the deed of the house you are suing me for? Calvin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Because I do, I said. And I have it right here. I signaled to Patricia. She opened the black binder. The trap was sprung, and they were standing right in the middle of it. The silence in the courtroom following my question was short-lived. It was broken by the booming laughter of my father, Calvin Wilson. He stood up from the plaintiff table, shaking his head as if he were dealing with a confused child rather than a legal adversary. He looked at the judge, and then at the gallery performing for his small audience of supporters. Is that a serious question? He asked, chuckling. Is this really your defense strategy, Jordan? You are going to question whether I own my own home. He turned to me, his face twisted in a mask of arrogant pity. Of course I am the owner, he declared loudly. I bought that house in 1990. I put the down payment on it with money I earned from my first business. I raised 3 children in that house. I mowed that lawn every Saturday for 30 years. My name is on the mailbox. My name is on the bills. He leaned forward, gripping the railing of the witness stand. I am the king of that castle, he said, and you were just a guest who overstayed her welcome. Deshawn nodded vigorously from his seat, whispering loud enough for the front row to hear. Tell her dad. Put her in her place. Saul the lawyer looked smug. He clearly thought I had made a fatal error by asking a question with such an obvious answer. He stood up, adjusting his cheap suit. Your Honor, I think the witness has answered the question, Saul said. The ownership of the property is a matter of public record. Mr. Wilson has lived there for 3 decades. This line of questioning is just a delay tactic to avoid paying what she owes. I remained standing. I did not look at my father. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice calm and leveled. The plaintiff counsel is absolutely correct. The ownership of the property is a matter of public record, and I would like to introduce that record into evidence right now. I nodded to Patricia. She tapped her tablet, and the large monitor mounted on the wall to the left of the judge bench flickered to life. The image that appeared was not a deed with Calvin Wilson's name on it. It was a document with a bright red stamp across the top. The stamp read, Foreclosure. The laughter in the room died instantly. My father froze. His hand, which had been gesturing expansively, froze in midair. He stared at the screen, blinking rapidly, as if trying to make the words change. What is this? Saul asked, squinting at the screen. I walked out from behind the defense table and approached the screen. This, I said, pointing to the document. is a notice of default and election to sell, filed by the Bank of Georgia against Calvin and Betty Wilson, dated 6 years ago. I signaled Patricia again. The slide changed. This is the record of sale from the Fulton County Courthouse steps dated 3 months after the foreclosure notice. It details the auction of the property at 45 Maple Street. I turned to face the room. 6 years ago, my parents' business failed. They made some bad investments. They leveraged the house to cover the losses. And when the market turned, they stopped paying the mortgage. They hid it from everyone. They hid it from Deshawn. They hid it from the church. And they tried to hide it from me. I looked at my mother in the gallery. She was pressing a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She remembered that year. She remembered the letters from the bank that she used to burn in the fireplace so no one would see them. But you cannot hide from the bank, I continued. The bank seized the house. Mr. Calvin Wilson lost his title, he lost his equity, he lost his kingdom. My father sank back into the witness chair. He looked suddenly smaller. The bluster was gone, replaced by a sickly gray pallor. "That is not true," he stammered, his voice shaking. We worked it out. The bank made a deal. They let us stay." I shook my head. "No, Dad. The bank did not make a deal. The bank sold the house to the highest bidder." I pointed to the bottom line of the auction receipt on the screen. "Sold to JOR Holdings LLC for the sum of $450,000. Saul jumped up. "So," what he shouted. "So the mortgage was sold to a holding company. That happens all the time. My client still lives there. He is still the owner in possession. This JOR Holdings is just the mortgage servicer." I smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who has just watched the prey step into the snare. "Actually, Mr. Goodmanstein," I said, "JOR Holdings is not a bank. It is a private investment firm. And when they bought the house, they did not reissue a mortgage. They issued a lease." Patricia swiped to the final document. It was a residential lease agreement. But it was unlike any lease most people had ever seen. The header read, "Occupancy Agreement for Charitable Assistance." I began to read from the screen. "This agreement is made between JOR Holdings LLC, hereinafter referred to as the landlord, and Calvin and Betty Wilson, hereinafter referred to as the tenants." I paused to let the word tenant sink in. "The landlord agrees to lease the premises at 45 Maple Street to the tenants for an indefinite period. The monthly rent for this property shall be," I pointed to the figure on the screen, $0.00. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning vents. I walked over to the witness stand and looked my father in the eye. He was trembling now. He recognized the document. He remembered the day a courier had delivered it to the door, just days before the sheriff was scheduled to throw them out. He remembered signing it thinking it was a miracle from God, thinking some anonymous philanthropist or government program had saved him. He had signed it with tears of relief. He had signed it, and then he had sworn never to tell anyone that he had almost lost everything. He had continued to strut around town, acting like a successful businessman while living on the charity of a stranger. "Mr. Wilson," I asked softly, holding a printed copy of the document in front of him, "do you recognize the signature on the bottom line?" He looked at the paper. The ink was black and bold. It was his signature. I signed a lot of papers," he whispered, "to save the house." "You signed a lease, Dad," I said. "You signed a document acknowledging that you no longer owned the home. You signed a document accepting charity. You became a tenant at will." I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff is suing me for back rent on a property he does not own. He is suing me for staying in a house where he himself is a guest. He is demanding payment from me while he has been living there for free for 6 years courtesy of JOR Holdings." Judge Miller looked at the documents on his monitor. He looked at Saul, who was frantically rifling through his own messy files, realizing he had failed to do a basic title search before filing the lawsuit. "Mr. Goodmanstein," the judge said, his voice stern, Did you verify the title of the property before filing this complaint? Saul stammered. My client assured me he had the deed. Judge Miller slammed his hand on the desk. You filed a suit for rent without proving ownership. This is a waste of the court time. But I was not done. The trap had one final mechanism. Deshawn stood up from the plaintiff table, his face red with confusion and anger. Who cares? He shouted, pointing at the screen. So some company owns the house. Big deal. They let us live there. They are on our side. You are still just a squatter, Jordan. JOR Holdings is probably going to sue you too once we tell them you lived there. I looked at my brother. The ignorance was almost pitiful. I walked back to the defense table and picked up the eviction notice I had signed yesterday. Actually, Deshawn, I said, JOR Holdings is very aware of who lived there. I turned back to my father. Dad, you asked who JOR Holdings is. You thought it was a bank. You thought it was a government program. I took off my glasses. JOR stands for Jordan Owner Ruler. My father's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I bought the house, Dad, I said. I was the one who paid the $450,000 at the auction. I was the one who set the rent to zero. I was the one who paid the property taxes every year. I created the LLC to hide my identity because I knew your pride would not let you accept help from your daughter. I wanted you to keep your dignity. I threw the eviction notice onto the table in front of him. But you took my dignity and you tried to sell it for a lawsuit settlement, so now I am taking my house back. My father looked at me. The blood had drained completely from his face, leaving him looking like a gray ghost. He looked at the signature on the eviction notice. Jordan Wilson, CEO. It was not just shock. It was a complete psychological collapse. The narrative he had built his entire life around, that he was the provider, that he was the strong patriarch that I was, the weak failure had just been shattered by a single piece of paper. He had been living in my house. He had been eating food bought with my money. He had been sleeping under a roof I provided. And he had just sued me for the privilege. The courtroom erupted into a chaotic hum of whispers. The revelation that my father had been living on charity for 6 years was a shock, but the identity of the benefactor was still a mystery to them. Deshawn jumped up from his seat, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. He waved his hand dismissively at the screen displaying the lease agreement. So what if a company owns it? Deshawn shouted over the noise of the gallery. Who cares about JOR Holdings? It is probably some tax shell company or a government housing initiative. The point is, they gave us a lease for $0. That means we have a right to be there. That means we have squatter rights or tenant rights. It does not matter if Dad signed it. The lease is valid. He turned to point a shaking finger at me. And you, Jordan, you are still just a guest. You do not represent JOR Holdings. You are just trying to confuse the judge with paperwork. If this company wants to evict us, let them send a representative. Let them come here and face us. You have no standing here. I looked at my brother. He was flailing, drowning in a sea of his own ignorance. He truly believed that a faceless corporation was going to swoop in and protect him from his sister. He thought JOR Holdings was his shield. He did not realize it was my sword. I walked slowly toward the witness stand where my father was still slumped, looking like a deflated balloon. I reached up and took off my thick-framed glasses, folding them deliberately and sliding them into my breast pocket. I wanted them to see my eyes. I wanted them to see the absolute clarity of my intent. You want a representative, Deshawn? I asked, my voice cutting through the noise. You want to meet the face of the company that saved you from homelessness. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, the plaintiff asks for standing. He claims I have no relationship to the property owner. I would like to direct the court attention to the Articles of Incorporation for JOR Holdings, LLC, filed in the state of Delaware 5 years ago. Patricia tapped her tablet. The screen changed again. There it was, the founding document, the black and white proof of my empire. I pointed to the name of the entity, JOR Holdings. I said, enunciating every letter. Do you know why I chose that name, Dad? It was not random. It was an acronym. A promise I made to myself the day I bought your debt. I looked directly at Deshawn. Jordan. Owner. Ruler. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Deshawn's mouth fell open. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. I am the company Deshawn, I said, stepping closer to him. I am the board of directors. I am the sole shareholder. I am the landlord. I signaled Patricia, and the screen shifted to a series of bank statements. These were not the forged documents Deshawn had presented. These were certified records from a corporate business account. You called me a freeloader, I said, pointing at the screen. Let us look at the math. Here is the wire transfer for $450,000 to purchase the home at auction. Money I earned writing code while you were partying in college. I swiped my hand in the air and the page turned. Here are the property tax payments. $8,000 a year for 6 years, $48,000, paid by me. Another swipe. Here is the insurance premium. The new roof I paid for 2 years ago when you said a storm damaged it. The water heater replacement, the landscaping fees. I turned back to my father, who was now trembling visibly. Total investment over 6 years is $450,000 in capital and over $200,000 in maintenance and taxes. I walked back to my table and leaned against it, crossing my arms. You sued me for $120,000 in back rent, I said quietly. You accused me of taking advantage of you. But the math says I have subsidized your lifestyle to the tune of nearly $750,000. I did not live in your basement. You lived in my investment property. And I let you stay for free because I loved you. I looked at my mother. I let you pretend you were still the lady of the house, Mom, because I knew how much appearances meant to you. I let you treat me like a tenant because I did not want to humiliate you by telling you the truth, that you were the guest. My mother began to weep soft, broken sobs that echoed in the quiet room. She looked at her husband, but Calvin could not meet her eyes. He was staring at the floor, crushed by the weight of his own hubris. But you broke the deal, I said, my voice hardening. The lease was for $0. The price was respect, and you could not even afford that. Deshawn sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at Saul. Do something, he whispered frantically. Say something. She is lying. Saul looked at the documents on the screen. He looked at the articles of incorporation with my signature on them. He looked at the bank statements that matched the dates perfectly. He was a sleazy lawyer, but he was not blind. He knew when a case was dead. He knew when a case was buried. I cannot do anything, Saul hissed back, slamming his folder shut. You sued your landlord for rent. You are an idiot. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I submit that the plaintiff claim for back rent is legally impossible, as one cannot owe rent to oneself. And the claim for emotional distress is moot, as the plaintiff has been living on my charity for half a decade. I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges. I stood there in the center of the room, surrounded by the ruins of their lies. I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, clean resolution. The secret was out. The burden was gone. I was no longer the daughter they looked down on. I was the power they had unknowingly bowed to every single day. Judge Miller removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked like a man who had seen everything but was still capable of being disgusted by human nature. He looked at the plaintiff table where Calvin was shrinking into his suit, and Deshawn was staring blankly at the wall. This court has seen many frivolous lawsuits, the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. But rarely have I seen such a display of ingratitude and deceit. He picked up the file containing Deshawn's complaint. He held it up as if it were contaminated. Mr. Goodmanstein, he said, addressing Saul. You brought a suit for rent without verifying ownership. You submitted altered utility bills, which is a matter I will be referring to the district attorney office for potential fraud charges. And your clients have wasted the court time attempting to extort money from the very person providing them shelter. Saul shrank back in his chair, mumbling an apology that nobody listened to. Judge Miller looked at me. "Ms. Wilson," he said, and there was a new note of respect in his voice. "The motion to dismiss is granted. The plaintiff claims are dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. Furthermore, I am ordering the plaintiff to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant." Deshawn's head snapped up. "Legal fees," he stammered. "But we don't have any money." "That is not my concern," the judge said sharply. But I was not finished. Dismissal was defense. I was here for offense. Patricia stood up. "Your Honor," she said, handing a fresh document to the bailiff. "While we appreciate the dismissal, the defendant has a counter-motion to file." Judge Miller raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Patricia walked to the podium. "My client JOR Holdings LLC is filing a countersuit for immediate eviction based on material breach of lease." Deshawn stood up. "You can't do that. We have rights. You have to give us 30 days' notice." Patricia ignored him and continued addressing the judge. "The lease agreement signed by Calvin Wilson clearly states in Clause 14 that any malicious damage to the property or any action that defames the landlord serves as grounds for immediate termination." She pointed to the screen where a new video was loading. "Yesterday, the tenant Ashley Wilson kicked and destroyed a server rack valued at $45,000 located in the basement of the property. This is a felony-level destruction of property. Furthermore, the tenants Deshawn and Ashley Wilson broadcast a live stream this morning from the courthouse steps, publicly slandering the property owner, calling her a thief and an abuser." The judge watched the clip of Ashley kicking the server. He watched the clip of Deshawn screaming lies into his phone. "This constitutes a hostile environment and a direct violation of the occupancy agreement," Patricia concluded. "We are not asking for 30 days, we are asking for an emergency writ of possession effective immediately." Deshawn looked at the judge, panic rising in his chest. "Your Honor, please," he begged. "My wife is pregnant. We have nowhere to go. You cannot kick us out on the street. We have rights. We are family." Judge Miller looked at Deshawn with eyes as cold as stone. "You ceased to be family when you filed this lawsuit, Mr. Wilson," the judge said. "You chose to handle this as a business transaction. You sued for your rights as a landlord. Now you will face the consequences of being a tenant." The judge looked at the evidence. He looked at the destroyed server. He looked at the defamation. He looked at the years of free rent. "I am granting the counter-motion," the judge said, his voice ringing out like a hammer on steel. He picked up his gavel. "The lease is hereby terminated. The tenants Calvin Betty Deshawn and Ashley Wilson are ordered to vacate the premises at 45 Maple Street." He looked at the clock on the wall. "It is now 11 a.m. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings. At 11 a.m. tomorrow, the sheriff will arrive to enforce the writ of possession and change the locks." 24 hours, Deshawn screamed. "That is impossible. We have furniture. We have a life. You have 24 hours, the judge repeated. "And if there is any further damage to the property, Ms. Wilson has my permission to pursue criminal charges." The gavel came down with a sound that signaled the end of the world for the Wilson family. Bang! Court is adjourned. I gathered my files. I did not look at my mother, who was wailing into her hands. I did not look at my father, who was staring at the table as if he wished the floor would swallow him. I walked toward the exit. Deshawn lunged toward the aisle, reaching for my arm. "Jordan, wait!" he pleaded, his eyes wild. "You can't do this. Where are we going to sleep?" I stopped and looked at him. I adjusted my sunglasses. "I hear the motel on the highway has vacancies," I said calmly. "And Deshawn." He looked at me with a glimmer of hope. "Do not forget to take your trash bags," I said. "You are going to need them." I pushed open the heavy doors and walked out into the sunlight, leaving them in the darkness they had created for themselves. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in their lives, they were on my time. The gavel had barely settled before the reality of the verdict crashed down on the Wilson family. The sound of the judge dismissing their case and granting my eviction order seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the room. For a moment, nobody moved. My father sat frozen, staring at the table where the eviction notice lay like a death warrant. Deshaun was blinking rapidly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then the dam broke. My mother Betty, who just minutes ago had been sitting with her chin held high, posing as the aggrieved matriarch, suddenly let out a wail that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. She scrambled out of her chair, moving faster than I had seen her move in years. She didn't run to her husband for comfort. She didn't run to her son. She ran straight to me. She threw herself at me, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. Her face, which had been perfectly powdered for her court appearance, was now a mask of melting mascara and terror. "Jordan, baby, please," she sobbed, her voice high and frantic. "You can't do this. You can't listen to that judge. We are your parents. We raised you. We prayed for you." I looked down at her hand, clutching the sleeve of my $3,000 suit. I didn't pull away immediately. I just let her hold on to me, feeling the tremors shaking her body. It wasn't the shaking of remorse. It was the shaking of a parasite realizing its host was detaching. "Mom," I said, my voice calm and void of any warmth. "You just sat there and watched your lawyer accuse me of emotional abuse. You let him say I was a burden." I didn't know, she screamed, dropping to her knees right there on the dirty courthouse floor. She actually hugged my legs, ignoring the bailiff who was stepping forward to intervene. "I didn't know about the house, Jordan. I thought your father was handling it. I thought he owned it. If I had known it was you. If I had known you were the one saving us." I looked over her head at my father. He was still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. He knew she was lying. We all knew. She might not have known the specifics of the LLC, but she knew the money didn't come from Dad. She knew they hadn't paid a mortgage in years. She just chose not to ask questions because the answers would have bruised her ego. "If you had known," I repeated, looking down at her, "you would have treated me better? Is that it? My worth is only tied to my utility." No, that's not what I mean," she cried, burying her face in my trousers. "We are family. You can't throw your elderly parents out on the street. What will the church say? What will the neighbors say?" Even in her moment of absolute desperation, she was worried about the neighbors, not her relationship with me, not the lies, the optics. I gently but firmly unpeeled her fingers from my leg and stepped back. "The neighbors already know, Mom," I said. "Deshaun made sure of that with his live stream." Speaking of Deshaun, he was currently trying to pull Ashley up from the bench, but she shook him off. Ashley, who had spent the last week painting me as a villain on social media, was undergoing a miraculous transformation. The sneer was gone. The arrogance was vanished. In its place was a wide, terrified smile that looked painful to maintain. She waddled over to me, pushing past my mother. She clasped her hands together in a pleading gesture, the large wooden cross swinging against her chest. "Jordan, sis," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet tone I hadn't heard since she wanted me to fix her laptop 5 years ago. "Look, things got heated. We all said things we didn't mean. You know how social media is. It's all just a game, right? I was just trying to build my brand. I didn't mean any of it." She reached out as if to touch my shoulder, but I leveled a stare at her that froze her hand in midair. "You kicked my server, Ashley," I said. "You destroyed my property. You accused me of drug addiction to thousands of people." "I was hormonal," she pleaded, patting her stomach. "You know how pregnancy is. I'm carrying your nephew Jordan, your own flesh and blood. You wouldn't let your nephew sleep in a motel, would you? Think about the baby. Stress is so bad for the baby." I looked at her stomach. The baby that was conveniently used as a shield whenever she needed to attack someone. "There is no baby, Ashley," I said. Her eyes went wide. "What? Of course there is. How dare you?" I pulled out my phone. I didn't open Instagram. I opened the security logs from the house server backed up to the cloud before the crash. I have audio recordings from the living room, Ashley, I said, scrolling through the files. From 2 weeks ago, when you were talking to your friend on the phone. Do you want me to play the part where you said, and I quote, "I'm just bloating myself with soda so Deshaun thinks I'm pregnant, otherwise he might make me get a job"? Ashley's face went from pale to a deep blotchy red. She looked back at Deshaun, who was staring at her with a look of dawning horror. Deshaun stepped forward, his voice cracking. You're not pregnant?" Ashley stammered, caught in the web of her own lies. I might be. I just haven't taken a test yet. I feel pregnant." I turned my back on them. The dysfunction was suffocating. I didn't want to be the audience for their implosion anymore. I wanted to be the architect of their exit. I unlocked my phone again and brought up Facebook. I found the post Deshaun had made yesterday, the one with the photo of me dragging the trash bag, the one with the caption, "Finally, the freeloader is gone." I held the screen up so they could all see it. "Deshaun," I said, "you wrote this. You were so proud of it. You wanted the world to know that the freeloader had left the building." Deshaun looked at the phone, then at me. Tears were streaming down his face now. Real tears. Tears of a man who realized he had thrown away a winning lottery ticket because he didn't like the way it looked. "Jordan, please," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I'll delete it. I'll delete everything. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. Just don't take the house. It's all we have." I looked at the post one last time. "You were right, Deshaun," I said. "You said the freeloader is gone, and you were absolutely correct. I am gone." I tapped the screen, taking a screenshot of his post to save for posterity. And now I continued, my voice echoing with finality. "The landlord is leaving too, and she is taking the keys with her." I signaled to Patricia. She handed me a thick envelope. "Here is a list of moving companies that specialize in rapid evacuations," I said, dropping the envelope on the bench next to my sobbing mother. "And here is a voucher for 3 nights at the Motel 6 on the interstate. It's not the Four Seasons, but it has electricity, which is more than you will have at the house in 24 hours. I turned and walked toward the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. Behind me, the sounds of my family disintegrating filled the air. My father was shouting at my mother. Deshaun was screaming at Ashley about the fake pregnancy. My mother was wailing about her reputation. I pushed the doors open and stepped out into the hallway. The air was cool and quiet. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in 5 years that didn't feel heavy with obligation. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and didn't look back. Not even once. The chapter was closed. The book was burned. And I was finally holding the pen. The sheriff deputy arrived at exactly 11 in the morning, just as the judge had promised. He did not come alone. He brought a crew of movers who specialized in rapid evictions. They carried heavy-duty black trash bags, the exact same kind my father had used to pack my life away just days before. The poetic justice of the moment was not lost on me as I sat in my car across the street watching the final act of this tragedy unfold. Deshaun was the first to emerge. He was not wearing his suit today. He was wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, struggling to carry his precious curved screen television. He looked frantic, his eyes darting back and forth as he realized the audience he had summoned was still there. The neighbors who had previously commented on his live stream supporting him were now standing on their lawns holding their phones up. But this time, they were not filming to support him. They were filming to mock him. I could see the flashes of their cameras capturing his humiliation in high definition. Ashley came out next, screaming at the movers who were tossing her designer clothes into the black bags without a care for the labels. She was trying to carry 3 boxes at once, her face a mask of panic. In her haste, she tripped over a crack in the driveway. The boxes flew from her hands and crashed onto the pavement. One of the boxes split open. It was not filled with baby clothes. It was not filled with diapers. It was filled with boxes of tampons and a bottle of wine. The crowd went silent. Deshaun, who had just managed to lean his television against the mailbox, froze. He looked at the tampons scattered across the driveway. He looked at Ashley, who was scrambling to cover them up, her face turning a deep shade of crimson. "You are not pregnant," Deshaun whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. Ashley tried to stammer an excuse. "It is for after the birth," she lied, but nobody believed her. "You lied to me," Deshaun screamed, his voice cracking with betrayal. "You let me sue my sister for a baby that does not exist. You let me destroy my family for a lie." He lunged at her, not to hurt her, but to push her away from him. The neighbors laughed. The cameras zoomed in. The narrative of the golden couple had collapsed completely, leaving only two liars standing amidst piles of garbage bags. I watched as the sheriff stepped in to separate them, telling them to take their dispute off the property. They looked like strangers to me now, just actors in a play that had gone horribly wrong. 6 months have passed since the house on Maple Street was emptied and sold. I did not keep it. I sold it to a nice young couple who had no idea about the drama that had soaked into the walls. I used the money to fund a scholarship program for underprivileged girls in tech. I heard about my family recently from an old neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who I ran into at the grocery store. She told me the news with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. My parents, Calvin and Betty, are currently living in a state-funded assisted living facility 2 towns over. It is not the luxury retirement community they had always bragged about. Mrs. Higgins said the walls are thin, the food is cold, and the staff does not care about their past glory. My mother apparently tells anyone who will listen that she is a victim of a corporate takeover, refusing to admit that the corporation was her own daughter. My father mostly sits by the window staring at nothing, having lost the only thing that gave him purpose, his pride. Ashley did not last long after the eviction. Deshaun divorced her 2 weeks later when the truth about the fake pregnancy went viral on TikTok. She was exposed by the very mommy bloggers she tried to manipulate. She lost her followers, her sponsors, and her dignity. The last anyone heard, she was working the front desk at a budget gym, trying to sell memberships to people who recognized her as the woman who faked a baby for clout. And Deshaun, my brother, who thought he was a financial genius. He is currently awaiting trial in the county jail. Desperate for money and unable to find a job that met his ego standards, he tried to open a new credit card using my social security number. He thought he knew my old passwords. He did not know that I had set up AI-driven fraud alerts on my identity. The moment he hit submit, the police were notified. He was arrested at the public library computer terminal. Mrs. Higgins asked me if I felt sad for them. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the cold basement. I thought about the heat. I thought about the lies. "No," I told her. "I do not feel sad. I feel free." I walked out of the store and into the sunshine. My phone buzzed with a notification from my server. System normal. All systems go. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. Forward, alone, and happy. The giant ceremonial scissors sliced through the heavy red satin ribbon with a satisfying crunch that echoed through the atrium. A roar of applause erupted from the crowd. Hundreds of people were standing in the lobby of the newly constructed Jordan Wilson Innovation Center. There were city officials in suits. There were tech investors in blazers. But most importantly, there were 50 young girls from the inner city wearing T-shirts that read "Future CEO." They were looking at me with eyes wide with wonder and possibility. I stood on the podium, holding the halves of the severed ribbon, and smiled. It was not the cold, calculated smile I had worn in the courtroom 6 months ago. It was a genuine smile, a smile that reached my eyes, a smile that felt light because it was not weighed down by secrets or shame. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice amplified across the glass and steel space. This building is not just about learning to code. It is about learning your worth. It is about understanding that your value is not determined by where you live or who your parents are or what anyone says about you on the internet. Your value is what you build. Your value is what you own. More applause. I looked out at the sea of faces, and for a split second I looked for them. It was a reflex, a phantom limb of an old habit. I looked for my mother trying to steal the spotlight. I looked for Deshaun, trying to network with people who did not want to talk to him. I looked for my father, trying to take credit for my success. But they were not there. The space was clean, the energy was pure. I handed the scissors to the mayor and stepped down from the stage. The press cameras flashed blinding white lights, but this time I did not need sunglasses to hide. I walked through the crowd shaking hands, accepting congratulations. Ms. Wilson, a reporter from the Times, called out, "Is it true that this center is fully funded by your private estate?" "It is," I answered without breaking stride. "Every brick, every server, every scholarship." It was the money that had once sat in the bank account of JOR Holdings, waiting to pay for a roof repair or a medical emergency for a family that despised me. Now that money was buying laptops for girls who had nothing but potential. It was the best investment I had ever made. I made my way to the private elevator at the back of the atrium. My new executive assistant, a sharp young man named Leo, was waiting for me with a tablet and a bottle of water. "Great speech, Jordan," he said as the doors closed, shutting out the noise of the party. "You have a 10-minute break before the board of directors meeting upstairs. The investors want to discuss the international expansion." I took a sip of water. The cool liquid soothed my throat. "I will be ready," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I usually kept it on Do Not Disturb during events, but I saw a notification badge on my personal email app. It was an account I rarely checked anymore, one I kept active only for legal notifications regarding the sale of the house. But this email was not from a lawyer. It was not from a bank. The sender name was Calvin Wilson. The subject line was just 2 words: "Please read." I stood there in the quiet elevator watching the floor numbers climb. 1, 2, 3. I debated deleting it unread. I debated letting it dissolve into the digital void. But curiosity is a human flaw, and I am still human. I tapped the screen. The email was short. It was written in all capital letters, as if my father still did not understand how to turn off the caps lock key on the library computer he was likely using. "Dear Jordan," it read, "I saw you on the news today. You look good. Your mother misses you. She cries every day. We are living in a facility now. It is not good here. The food is bad, and they treat us like children. I know we had our differences, but we are still blood. I have a favor to ask. Not for me, but for your mother. She needs medication for her blood pressure, and Medicare does not cover the good kind. It is only $200. Please, Jordan. I am sorry for everything. Just send a little help. Love, Dad." I stared at the words. Love, Dad. He ended with love. The same man who had sat in a courtroom and laughed when asked if I owned the house. The same man who had watched his son throw money at my feet. $200. It was an insignificant amount to me now. I had spent more than that on the flower arrangement in the lobby. I could transfer it in 3 seconds. I could solve his problem. I could ease his pain. The old Jordan, the girl in the basement, would have done it. She would have sent the money thinking it would buy his love. She would have thought that maybe this time he would appreciate it. But the woman standing in the elevator was not that girl. I looked at the request for what it truly was. It was not an apology. It was a transaction. He did not say he was proud of me. He did not ask how I was. He started with a compliment manipulated with guilt about my mother and ended with a demand for cash. It was the same cycle, the same toxicity, just in a smaller font size. If I sent $200 today, next week it would be $500 for rent. Next month it would be a car. They would never learn to stand on their own feet as long as I continued to be their crutch. And more importantly, I realized that sending that money would be an act of disrespect to myself. It would be an admission that their abuse had a price tag, and that I was willing to pay it. The elevator dinged softly as we reached the penthouse floor. The doors slid open, revealing a boardroom full of people waiting for my leadership. People who respected me. People who listened when I spoke. Leo looked at me. "Is everything okay, Jordan?" I looked at the phone screen one last time. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt nothing. It was the indifference of a stranger reading a spam message about a prince in a foreign country needing a wire transfer. I moved my thumb to the bottom of the screen. I did not hit reply. I did not hit delete. I pressed the button marked Report Spam. The email vanished into the junk folder where it belonged, buried alongside advertisements for cheap pills and fake prizes. Then I went a step further. I opened the settings and selected Block Sender Domain. It was the final brick in the wall I had built around my peace. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Everything is perfect, Leo," I said, stepping out of the elevator. I walked into the boardroom. The chatter stopped. 12 heads turned toward me. They were not looking at a scapegoat. They were not looking at a failure. They were looking at the CEO. "Shall we begin?" I asked, taking my seat at the head of the table. "We have an empire to build. Blood does not define family. Biology is just a biological accident. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, support, and love. When that foundation is cracked by abuse and exploitation, no amount of money or guilt can repair it. We are taught that we must carry our family on our backs, no matter how heavy the burden becomes. But there comes a moment when you realize that the weight is crushing your soul. Putting yourself first is not selfishness, it is survival. When the respect dies, the relationship dies with it. And the most powerful thing you can do is bury it, mourn it, and walk away into a future that belongs entirely to you. This story serves as a powerful reminder that toxic loyalty is the most expensive debt you will ever pay. Jordan Journey teaches us that you cannot buy love from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Her family saw her as a resource, not a person, and the moment she cut off the supply, they revealed their true nature. The lesson is clear. We teach people how to treat us. By accepting the bare minimum, we invite abuse. But by setting boundaries and enforcing them with consequences, we reclaim our power. Financial independence is the ultimate shield against manipulation. Jordan did not just get revenge, she got freedom. And freedom is the sweetest revenge of all. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about reclaiming your power. Have you ever had to block a family member to save your mental health? Let me know your story in the comments below. Remember, you are the CEO of your own life. Do not let anyone else sit in your chair.